So on the go, I have a Tolstoy, and I have a Buckminster Fuller's book from 1967, where he introduces the idea of spaceship Earth. And
Oh,
then, of
wow.
course, I get sent a lot of books to review as well. So I just received one by an economist on what 2100 might look like, which even
Oh,
in my
interesting.
line of business is a bold and brave thing to do. How about you? What are you reading?
I have a stack that I'm excited to read over the break. I've been reading this book by Scott Berkun, which is How Design Makes the World. He's a fantastic author at simplifying really complicated topics, and I just love the idea of thinking about design as a lens through which to think about how things work. So
Mm,
that's been great. And books about teaching. I'm always reading books about teaching.
yes.
There's a nice one by Flower Darby and James Lang. Small teaching online. So we teach small classes here at the journalism school, and teaching techniques and tactics and the craft is of great interest to me.
Uh, I mean, that's your professional discipline. So that in a way is a how-to manual. And one of the things I'm really curious about is sometimes academia really does get ahead of the challenges and of the things that we will face 5 or 7 years later. And sometimes, if there's a discontinuity, they might miss that. So when you look at these teaching books, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that the academics have been sort of fortunate and diligent and are speaking to the current moment, even though they did the work years ago, or have they missed the turn?
I think some things are everlasting, right? The importance of actually looking at your students in the eye, being there in presence, like with them, making learning active and not passive. That those
Hmm.
things I think are lasting, and those things this kind of book hits on really well. What they don't do as well is think about how do we use the new kinds of technology to change the way we teach, or how is it going to impact the way we teach. And that I think is the super big challenge in the age of AI, right? So that
Mm.
next era of books is really going to, from a teaching perspective, is really going to address this question of how does this change our active teaching, and how does it change the way students learn? And that stuff is only now being written. So I think that's to come. And you're a fellow at Harvard Business School, at
Mm.
Oxford, at
Mm.
all these places. What's been one of your insights in terms of teaching? I'm curious about that, because teaching wasn't necessarily the first thing you did, but now you're
Yeah, well, fortunately, I don't have to teach. I get to work with researchers and academics and sort of ask questions with them. What I've noticed is at Harvard Business School, they really leaned in to the ChatGPT moment quite early on. They encouraged use of the tools, and you're, in fact, in some cases, in some classes, I think in operations research, you're encouraged to use the tools during your assessments, which I think
right.
is really useful and important. I think that teaching is, on the one hand, it encapsulates sort of one idea, but it's so different if you're teaching in a business school to if you're teaching in philosophy, or if you're teaching in the humanities or science, and the level at which you're teaching, really changes what engagement needs to look like. But I do think that there are some deep commonalities, and one of those commonalities is, can you, for an extended period of time, push yourself through the entirety of an argument, whether that's a peer-reviewed paper or it's a book, and that capacity, which forces you to take on the point of view of the author and where the author has come from, and hold into a head an argument that they probably spent 3 to 5 to 7 years coming together, and you're going to get through in 7 or 8 hours, is an extremely important skill. And I think what it also does is make you better at using the AIs. So I think if you're, of course, like everybody, I'm using Gemini and Claude and so on to speed through material. Uh, and I'm sure that if I have 10 hours to learn something, I will learn it better through an LLM than I would reading a book. However, the deeper infrastructural concepts, the threads that underlie the argument of the author, are not really going to come through with a kind of pecking at the buffet table that an LLM provides. But I do think there is a deep integration between the two, which is, you read a book, your brain changes, that changed brain is capable of asking more of the LLMs, which in turn pushes you a little bit further, maybe reinforces the concepts, and then you can read a different book on the same or a different subject. So I think that they work quite well in parallel.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the keys is, are you learning actively or passively? Whether you're using an AI or not, whether you're reading a book passively or actively is going to change the experience you have in learning. And one of the big findings in learning science is the importance of activity, regardless of the modality, right? If you're using an
Right.
LLM and the LLM is just telling you how, the solar system works, and you're just kind of quickly scanning through that, that's much different than if it's quizzing you on it and asking you to explain it as you would explain it to a child, to test your own knowledge and to sort of practice your own explanatory skills. Like that to me is the crucial piece, whether it's done through an LLM or whether it's, you're reading a book and you're in a notebook, writing down how you would explain this to somebody else, for example. I think
Yeah,
that's.
I have a few hacks around that. One is that my ChatGPT, which tends to be the sort of flagship model that I use, is configured to act like an incredibly intelligent professor who will always ask a difficult question.
Mm,
And so, what I often find when I'm working in material with ChatGPT is that the way in which the answers get framed is quite difficult, and it's always leaving me with this question right at the end. And so much so that I often have to copy the answer and put it into Claude and say,
mm,
explain this to me like I'm a bright high schooler. So then I can read that, then I go back and I can understand what ChatGPT has gone off and said to me. It can be quite exhausting, I have to say.
mm,
Like if you can imagine just always being, I mean, you're a bright professor, right? What it must be like for one of your students to be constantly interrogated by you. So that's one hack. The other one that another that I use, I mean, I have several that help me here, is that especially if it's a kind of a technical area, now I have the advantage, I have access to all the models. So in Gemini Pro, I might get it to build me an app. So if I'm asking about a series of dynamics, say in the economy, say we'd want to look at something to do with money supply, I might explain what I'm looking for, have a discussion, then ask it to build the interactive app. And then I can use the interactive app and play with the parameters and see how things change. So that is a little bit like when you move from reading the theory of supply chains to doing one of those exec ed round the table. We're all going to play a different part of the supply chain type of things that I think you can do with the models. And what I would say is that it's not like the Matrix where Neo, they push the button and he knows kung fu in a second,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
It's not like that at all. It is a much more complicated, sophisticated class of pedagogy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the ways in which we dialogue with the AI tools that we're using is so crucial, and finding that place between, having it be understandable and useful and scannable is so important, but then also having friction. Like I think friction is such a key part of learning, and that sometimes is missing when the AI is kind of giving us what we need immediately. We're having a lot of discussions here at the journalism school at CUNY about how much AI is healthy and useful for students to use. On the one hand, they're going to be asked to use AI in various professional capacities. They're editing audio and they need to remove background noise, or they're transcribing or translating material. On the other hand, maybe learning to transcribe by hand, or maybe learning to fidget with sound waves without the help of AI, maybe teaches you something about the process that's valuable. Certainly with
Yeah, well, I
writing.
think so. Friction, I think, is really important. I will share with you one of my friction tips as well. So here is my surprising app. It's a fountain pen that I work with. But if you open up the fountain pen, I should have done this beforehand. Uh, oh, there is an ink cartridge. No, there's no ink cartridge in there. Right. So there's no ink cartridge because I dip the pen in this bottle of ink. Now, why do I not have an ink cartridge or even an ink reservoir in there? Because if I am writing and every 5 words or
Mm,
10 or 15 words, I have to stop to dip the pen in ink, I'm slowing myself down. And so I tend to do a few hours of work a week. A lot of my long form thinking is done handwritten in that fountain pen. That lovely. I got it actually in Boston, in the US. The brand is Colo, and I write with it. It takes a standard Mont Blanc cartridge, but I write with it and I dip it into the ink, and go along. And the purpose there is, in a world where I can move really, really quickly, I will slow myself down. I'll get very haptic in the experience and look at what I'm writing and force myself to cross out mistakes and
Mm.
feel frustrated about mistakes. So therefore, slow my thinking down even more.
I think that's really interesting. To me, it also allows you to focus in on the individual words, on the feeling of the, the tangible connection you have to the paper. Like there's something also about just being slow and allowing your brain to slow down and be present and focused when we're typing. Or now I'm using, whisper flow, like voice typing essentially, right? And so then there's the chance for me to be really fast, which is great in some ways, in that it helps me get past the cold start problem, right? The writer's block. But then in other ways, maybe it makes it too easy, right? To just
Mm.
put all this down and then later on have to cope with all that. So maybe there's a benefit.
Well, but it's a set of different tools that you have to use as part of your toolkit. So I don't want to pretend that I'm just sitting here using a quill pen and going off and catching snails and crushing their shells up to make my ink. I mean, I'm not doing any of that. I am. So overnight, I might have a dozen, 20 really long, deep research queries running, and that I will wake up to and read and take a look at using different tools. So that's accelerated. And I also, like you, use Whisper Flow or some of the other audio products. And one of the things I will do when I longhand write something, is having written it longhand, I will then read that out into Whisper Flow,
Mm,
because I'm really used to thinking as I talk.
yeah.
And as I read, I'm editing in real time. So then what is finally turned into the transcript has been my longhand writing, my reading out, my realization the structure doesn't work. And then I have a transcript which I can then put into the next stage of the process.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think this idea of app smashing, we used to call it, combining different apps. In this case, like modality smashing, like using some old-fashioned, paper writing with ink, and then using, Whisperflow to kind of bring that into the digital era is really interesting. For me, one of the examples of that is writing by hand on paper, just my notes as I'm reading, and then using ChatGPT or Claude to understand that handwriting, which I never could do. I would just have those pieces of paper lying somewhere unused, and now I can kind of digitize those and summarize them and structure them in Notebook LM or somewhere else. Um, let's get into our toolkits.
Mm.
I'm so curious about you as someone who bridges these worlds of kind of old fashioned, great traditional learning, Oxford, Harvard style, and looking ahead at the future. You have this really interesting bridge position. So what are a couple of the core tools in your toolkit, and things that you're coming back to on a daily basis?
Mm. Well, all of the major LLMs, as you might imagine. So Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity and Grok to some extent, and more recently Manus. So Manus is actually pretty good at broad searches where you don't really need to go very deep in argument. So a really good way that I will use, I think is good anyway. Maybe it's terrible. I'll use Manus is if I'm working on my new book amongst other things, and sometimes what you want to do is you want to, as you might have get an RA to go off and say, find color, right? Go off and find the case studies, the anecdotes, the famous quotations. And you don't need the high IQ deep research of Gemini Pro 3 or of ChatGPT. So that kind of query that you can throw out to Manus, it'll take 30 or 40 minutes. So it's the sort of thing that I will queue up and run overnight. And of course, it then changes the way that I work with the book, because I'm not going to do that in line and I'll get my quotes back. So that one is a really, every single day use. But the other thing is that, and I think this is really true, and I think this is really old fashioned, for want of a better word, which is that, if you were a painter in the 16th or 17th century, you went and made your own ink. if you were Edmund Holyoake, who was the president of Harvard College in the 1730s, you spent 4 days every 6 months, elbow deep in beef and pig fat, making your tallow candles so you could do your scholarship late into the night. You built your own tools. We build our own tools within my team at Exponential View, which is mostly researchers. So the team have may do different things, but I have built a set of research tools that and workflows that I will use as my, as it were, Bloomberg desktop if I was an investor. So I will log in. My internal tool is called Prism. It looks at thousands and thousands of pieces of research that we have looked at, that we've read, and allows me to query across them. But also, it has conceptual and framework based lenses that are built into it that run constantly looking for things that it knows I'm thinking about. So you'll be familiar with my last book. I introduced the idea of the exponential gap. And so for sake of argument, I don't have this one running because I've written the book already. I have a lens looking for exponential gap um, examples or counterexamples running overnight, and I could come in and take a look. And that's a little bit like, again, imagine I was a PI of a lab and I've got 10 postdocs and a bunch of doctoral students. They're not all thinking about what comes after the special theory of relativity, right? Some of them are just doing constant literature searches, looking for things that might be interesting, and that's the same process. And so, I spend virtually no time on Google searching for things, nothing on Wikipedia at all, not a sausage, not a moment now, unless it shows up. But a lot of these internal tools, and we've developed quite a lot of capability around how good does the incoming information need to be, and how good do the tools themselves and the queries and the interactions between agents. I mean, some of these they're calling them agents, but they're prompts. Basically, some of these are quite sophisticated. There may be 7 or 8 different roles that go back and forth with each other, and you need to maintain coherence and state. But at the end of it, what I'm going to get is, here are two or three things that are really worth my while taking human time with my pen to go and look at.
How concerned are you, if at all, about kind of putting material you're working on for your book into an LLM system? I get this question a lot from people, from journalists in particular, who are worried that if they're using a model, whether it's Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, some other model, that somehow their material could leak, or that it could be accessed by other folks, or that the model will somehow train on it or ingest it in full. How concerned are you about that? Do you think
Can I give a glib answer or a serious answer?
either or both? Yeah.
Well, the glib answer is, just look at the trajectory of journalism commercially over the last 30 years. I'm not sure, as a profession or as an industry, it's made very good calls around technology. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
The serious answer is just look at the terms and conditions. The next answer is, how good really is your idea? The next answer is, well, the knowledge cutoff is is going to be, a year from now. So unless your book is coming out in 5 years, but is absolutely dependent on something that was discovered in 2025, which feels like there's not, that set is zero. I don't think there's any real issue at all. I'm more concerned, frankly, more concerned than I should be about putting some of the ideas out into my Substack writing. Although my team tells me I'm being a bit of a wally about that, and I should just be more relaxed about it.
Right. I mean, it certainly gets people excited or interested, right, or curious about your
Yeah.
work. And you have this model, this 5 kind of part model, right, looking at AI as a kind of systems, right, perspective.
Right.
Is the kind of internal tooling that you described, is that really crucial for that process as well? Is that part of how you do that?
Yeah, so the 5-part framework was something that we developed over a few months to try to understand where we are in the investment cycle. So I don't want to say, is there a bubble? It's more, where are we in the investment cycle? Not all productive investment cycles end up in bubbles. Many do, and to even ask the question, where are we in the AI bubble, is already presuming that there is one. And I don't know. I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying yes. I'm saying, there's a set of stressors that we could look at. A lot of the core research was done by gathering data using LLMs, the regression modeling and the data science I did to find what the stresses were supported by an LLM called Julius, where I'm an investor, which is a bit like Python and NumPy and Jupyter Notebooks meets ChatGPT, and that helped me identify sort of the likely stressors. And then what that tries to do is for any decision maker or an investor is say, here are the 5 stressors. How close are any of them to being at a critical point, at which point we need to ask questions about what's going on? And a lot of that is we've built automation. So, we go off and track all of or as many of the data center deals that we can find, and we do what we can, where sometimes they can be publicly available because you have to file at the SEC. Sometimes you can't. And then we have series of tools that will unpick those and say, yeah, this is a reasonable structure, or this is a structure that has some of the stresses that we are looking for, and that goes in a queue, and then a human can take a look at that and say, okay, do we want to take this or not? So there's a lot, there's a lot of automation that that the team has built to make that make sense for us, because otherwise there's no way in a team of 5 and six and a bit, because we
Mhm.
got somebody starting, that we could produce the podcast and the vodcast and the book and the essays and my speeches and the data sets that we build and the boom or bubble analytics and some other products that we're launching next year. So yeah, that you can only do that by expanding a team.
You mentioned all of these different initiatives you have, right? You have a lot of
Mm,
stuff going on, the podcast, the Bloomberg stuff, the Harvard, the Oxford, the book,
mm,
all these things, right? So a lot of people may be wondering kind of how you manage yourself, your own schedule, your own tasks, your own, notes and all that material. Do you have a kind of consistent singular system? Do you use a lot of different tools? Are you kind of like
mhm.
an army knife person who does everything with one tool, or do you use a lot of different tools for each different aspect of what
I,
you're
I
doing?
mean, the big secret is my team. So my team are really amazing, and they have also expanded their own capacity. So they all use these tools to get more done and actually get better done, I would say, rather than just more. They are a very, very thoughtful group. So they challenge ideas quite regularly, and we like that. But it's absolutely clear that the AI is helping us be more effective. So from granola to taking meeting notes, to one of my favorites is Shortwave, which is a email client that sits on your Gmail. So you can get Shortwave, you can ask all sorts of amazing questions of Shortwave, and it's got 15 years of my email. So I was looking for, there was some particular thing I needed to go back to from 2013 or 2014, and I could just put a natural language query into Shortwave. It took 10 minutes because it had to go back through a lot of email, and it gives you a result. But even when you have a lot of projects on, Shortwave is really, really powerful. So I'm an investor in about 40 startups. So I get every quarter between 25 and 30 founder reports. So not every founder sends these reports.
Mhm.
And what I can do is I can go to Shortwave and say, how's this founder doing? How well are they sticking to their milestones? Have they changed the goalposts? What are they exceeding? What are they not exceeding? Where do they seem to have
Mm.
um, problems where I can be helpful? And that query just runs, um, and I run it, and I'll then use that to help me guide myself through the entrepreneurs updates.
Mm.
And then I'm much more helpful when I talk to them. And as a consequence, now they'll talk to me 3 times a year rather than once every 3 years. And I
Mm.
actually know what the hell's going on with their businesses, and I can be a bit more helpful. So that is a way, like that has absolutely allowed me to maintain a portfolio of that size without having to hire an analyst to help me, because I'm trying to be a good angel investor to them. I'm probably rubbish, but I'm trying to be a good one.
That's such a great example. I think, a lot of people think of using AI to summarize material and thinking of that as a shortcut that you don't get past the surface. But actually, I think what you're pointing out is it can act as a kind of a BS filter cutting device, right? Like you can actually cut through sort of the superficial artifice and get at the real meaty questions or issues, and then actually get deeper rather than being superficial.
You can get deeper. Can I just say something about that, right? So you can get deeper and it will still there will be mistakes because I'm asking it to do
Mhm,
quite a sophisticated thing. But it's not clear to me that even an analyst who I might have hired would not have made similar mistakes on the question of has so and so moved the goalposts or
mhm,
has the mood changed based on what these updates have said over the previous months. I mean, that is a something that doesn't really have a yes no answer, and so of course you have to read this quite carefully. And if you see something that is being flagged up to you or feels like it's out of bound, it's my job to go back by hand and read and interpret and ignore if necessary.
mhm. Yeah, I think one of the ways you can do that in that context is using a team AI as a team. So you say basically play 5 different roles or 3 different roles, and takes on a particular position, right? This
Have you done that with any of your work?
Yes, yes, definitely. So I'll put in a newsletter post that I'm working on. It's a minor piece of work, right? It's just an individual post, a couple thousand words or 1,000 words. And I'll say, give me a harsh critique that explains why this is really dull and repetitive and has already been covered in prior posts, and a series of other things like that. And then another voice saying essentially, no, actually there's a lot of value here, and here's how to build on that value. And just kind of reading through those, I can see, okay, yes, that's a legitimate point, and that's less legitimate, and it's a different kind of interaction than if I just have it give me with one voice a simple response, which where it's
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And what it also brings up is that if you're working in a conceptual space, which we are, and we're not reporting back on the results of some experiments, which a lot of I mean, you may be also doing experiments like that in your research, but I'm not. There isn't really a right answer. So
Mhm,
the to the question, have I spent enough time building the axioms of this argument, is you could give that to 3 professors and you'll get
mhm,
4 different answers.
mhm,
And so what you're doing with the tool is you're saying it's better to have this reflect on my work so I can reflect on whatever it's identified
mhm.
than nothing at all.
Yep.
And that, I think, is one of the sort of powerful aspects of it.
Yeah.
Are you teaching your kids how to? I mean, your students how
And
to do that sort of thing?
We're starting to. We're starting to. We're at the early stages of this. But yes, we are. We did a simulation exercise recently where we had 4 different situations that might occur in a newsroom where they're debating, okay, to what extent is it okay to take this written piece of journalism and use AI to create social posts out of it, for example?
Mm.
Or to what extent is it okay to go even further and have an AI tool create a first draft of some bit of information, right? Converting a press release into a news story so that the editors can then write it more efficiently from that. Is that going too far? Is that
Hmm.
well, what are the likely implications of that? What's going to happen in the real world in a newsroom that does that? How are the different stakeholders going to feel about that? Generating illustrations, that's a big topic of discussion among journalists these days. Is in what instances might it be okay to use AI generated illustrations or infographics? Where is that problematic? Where is that helpful? So having the students start to wrestle with that and start to add some nuance. I think so much of the AI debates, so many of the debates we hear are very kind of black and white, and people stake really strong positions on either end of the spectrum. And what we're trying to get is a little more nuance, in what kind of disclosure should we use if we do this, and which kinds of models do it a little bit better than others,
Hmm.
in which specific use cases might it make sense, and so forth. So we're doing that. One of the challenges I see is that it's moving so quickly that many folks are just not keeping up with it. They don't have bandwidth, right, to keep up with it. If you're a student, you're focused on your 5 classes and learning how to report and write and take photographs and video and audio and so many other things, that keeping up with the capabilities of AI is just not necessarily something, even though people kind of have a general sense of how important it is. They just don't have the bandwidth in many cases.
Well, this has been OpenAI's problem, and there was some reporting from the Information in the last week or two, which identified the strategic challenge they faced. So they've gone off. They've got 1,000 researchers who are all reasonably bright. They've built these amazing deep research tools, and most people just want to know which movie should I watch tonight, or draw my dad as if he was Spider-Man for his 70th birthday card. And that challenge has created a lot of their headache right now, which is, are you supporting the sort of ultra advanced users and over-serving, and therefore in a way underserving people who just want a quick, snappy answer? And I think what that tells us is that when you look at the adoption numbers of ChatGPT, or whatever it is, it's a billion users. That adoption is it's a very liminal, gray adoption.
Mm,
It's not like adopting the flush toilet.
mhm,
When you get the flush toilet in your home for the first time, adoption of that flush toilet means that is the loo you use, and you stop going out into the garden. But I don't think most of the billion or 2 billion people using chatbots are at the stage that that's the only tool they use for the job for which it is best suited.
mm,
They're still using Google. They're still creating their financial models from a blank spreadsheet in Google Sheets rather than getting, ChatGPT to start with the skeleton. And they're still doing all of those things. So it belies, I think, the reality that yes, we've all got it, but how many of us are actually marching up that adoption, diffusion curve where it's really part of our life? And there's so much going on that you can't really keep up. My team uses MCP based tools much more than I do. Um, Another team member she's decided she's gone off and built a load of Claude tools, which are tools that you can get Claude to call during your interactions. I haven't built a Claude tool, but I've built lots of other things. Um, I hadn't used Manus properly until a buddy of mine at HBS recommended that I try it. So I started 2 weeks ago, and of course, he's right for that particular use case. But then the other thing is, all of this is expensive.
mhm.
I mean, we spend as a team, I would say probably in between $350 and $500 per person per month.
Yeah, it's absolutely expensive. There are ways of getting around that, right? The Hugging Face world of open source and sort of free tools. Jan AI is an example of a private AI tool that you can use completely for free, right? And so some of those tools do exist, and they're actually getting better, right? So they do kind of the base level AI work really well, and you don't have to pay a dime for them. However, if you want to have the contemporary models, you have to pay significantly, and that is going to be a new digital divide. Going back to the kind of toilet example,
Mm.
one of the things I think that's also distinct at this moment is that if there's a alternative to the toilet, I don't really know of it, right? So that's pretty much the one player in that game. But in the realm of AI, we have really strong series of players, right? And it reminds me of the early social media era with Twitter competing against Plurk and Jaiku, which most
Oh,
people will have never heard of or have forgotten it completely.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Well,
but
I mean, I knew the Jaiku founders, and I
oh
was a big
wow,
plurker. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, you've had a long history in this
yeah,
this
yeah.
realm. But what we probably think of now as of that in terms of that market is that Twitter really kind of cornered that, and so many other realms have that similar kind of multiplayer competitive space that boil down to the one, the Instagram instead of pick please, for example, and the visual kind of social post
Mm.
realm. So what I'm getting at is that I think in this realm of OpenAI versus Google versus Anthropic versus Microsoft versus Grok and various other players, we are likely to see eventually, right, a further winnowing of that. I'm curious what your thought is on that. If you think this is a kind of market where multiple players will ultimately survive and thrive by staking out, specific corners of the market, or if you think in the end it's just a too capital intensive business that ultimately it's going to be a winner take all kind of situation.
Winner take all it emerges in one of two places. One is grift, where you buddy up to the politicians and they give you a monopoly. That's the original model that the England and the Dutch
Mhm.
pioneered in the 16th and 17th century. Uh, the other is that you have established some kind of a network monopoly with increasing returns to scale.
Like
There's
Microsoft,
a
right?
Microsoft
Back in the
or
Facebook, right?
Google and Facebook and so on, there is also a model, a sort of similar related model, which is that you become so big that capital is your moat. And that's what Uber did, where there's not really a network effect with Uber that's really meaningful. I mean, there is the two-sided platform, bring drivers and passengers together, but effectively you scare off the competition by just raising so much money. Uh, I haven't seen an AI, a strong reason to think that a network effect will emerge, and for a couple of reasons. One reason is that what would that network end up really being, and is it the data that you get in? Well, of course, they're all trying to secure unique data, but if you get the unique data for um, clown makeup, and I get the unique data for vineyards in Italy, and somehow that's not publicly available. If I'm not interested in clowns, I'm not going to use your LLM. And if you're not interested in wine, you're not going to use my system. So I don't quite see the path to there being one that wins it all. And in particular, during this sort of period of acceleration where they're chasing each other, do they get no one's really able to maintain a lead for more than a few weeks, and sort of lead length is diminishing.
Mm,
And even when you did get the lead, like Gemini Pro 3, Claude 4.4, 4.5 Opus was still the best coding model.
mm, mm,
And then ChatGPT 5.2 Pro came out and it grabbed a whole bunch of workflows from Gemini. But actually, Claude is still the best coding model, and Gemini 3 with anti-gravity, which I've been using today, is pretty good, but I'm still probably going to use Claude. So in a world where it's impossible to dominate every part of that Pareto frontier, and users have different needs, requirements, and frankly, even preferences, it's quite, I can't quite see the path to and everyone wins everything, except that there is this point that you made, which is that most people can't, don't push the tools as far as they need. So if the market is more milk toast style, actually it's kind of just good enough, and not enough people care about it being any better, so everyone just loves it being mid, then maybe Google just wins because they can do mid better than anyone else. But if the market does segment and people say, listen, hey, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a garden designer, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, and I've got really more specific needs, I think that it, you end up with a large number of models of different types, and they're not all big frontier models. Some might be quite small, almost like tools, being the shape of that industry.
mm. I think one key factor from my perspective is going to be interoperability, meaning if you like what happened with Microsoft, Windows was not necessarily technically the perfect system, right? A lot of people who've used it for years will tell you that. But all the software ran on Microsoft, right? So if you wanted to run any piece of software, you had to use Microsoft. And right now, I think one of the things that Anthropic did, which was brilliant, was creating this kind of standard, the MCP standard you referenced, which allowed you
Mm.
to connect different services, right? So you don't have to use ChatGPT necessarily to use those kinds of apps that they've established. You can also do
Hmm.
that kind of thing, that connecting your Canva to your Claude by using the MCP protocol, which anyone can use. So I think that is an interesting kind of strategic play that levels the market in a way that'll be interesting. I think if it were the case that if you wanted to connect tools, you had to use ChatGPT or you had to use Copilot, that would create a problematic market dynamic for the competitors who weren't plugged into that system. But now that any of these tools can plug into virtually any tool you're using, whether it's Notion or Google Drive or what have you, it becomes harder for them to dominate in the way that Microsoft did in those early days.
It does, and I've also noticed the shift to is it good enough? We run a whole load. Well, again, we don't set in company wide standards, but I know Nathan, for example, runs lots of his workflows on Gemini 2 Flash, which is now 2 generations old, because they work.
Mhm.
That it's got getting really cheap, and there's no point changing it. I recently, on something I did, moved the default LLM down to DeepSeek 3.2 Speciale, rather than uh, Gemini Pro 3, because it's in general it's really good enough. And if on the occasion I don't think it is, I can fire it out to one of the other models again. So there is this sense that we want to abstract away uh, from the models in some cases, but then, and that's where I really like the way Anthropic with Claude have done what they're doing, which is to really nail that coding. I mean, Claude is really great at two things. It's really great at coding, so Lego blocks and bricks, and it's really good at sculpting text. So it is my um, we never, for important things, we never use one LLM anyway, but it's the default starting point for textual review, because there's something about its surface and its insight and actually its tenderness with text that you don't get with ChatGPT, which is a bit like an engineer taking his slide rule to your beautifully constructed phrases.
Yeah, I think there's a design aesthetic. We started by talking about this the importance of design. That book, Design Makes the World. And I think Claude is designed as a human thing. You interviewed the co-founder of Claude, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Of
I heard it is.
Anthropic.
Yeah.
He talks about the name, right? The name Claude. They wanted to feel like someone helpful, right? How does that compare with the name ChatGPT, which no one really understands what that name means, right? And I think that
Right.
aesthetic of thinking about design and thinking about the user experience has really helped Claude in a period where maybe they're outmatched in terms of capital spend, right, or in terms of the sheer number of engineers. But I think that design strength they have in terms of the visual design, but the interaction design, the sense of user focus, really helps. One thing I think is that the good enough point that you made is really significant. When we look at phones, we're on the 17th version of the iPhone,
Hmm.
et cetera. Like, there's very little to distinguish the phones across the models anymore, right? So people choose them for reasons that are really non specific to the quality of the actual experience of using the phone, right? It's a design, it's a style decision. You've already bought the
Hmm.
accessories or the cases, or you just like the operating system, or you're locked into the operating system. Um, so I think at some point we may reach that point as well, right? The models are getting so good that for most, as you mentioned, a lot of people are using it for the Spider-Man kind of use case. For the majority of 80-20 cases, 80-20 rule cases, it's not going to matter if you have the absolute best model. And it's going to be more about design, about personality, about the feel, about the privacy policies, all these other external things.
It might be. I think that's what OpenAI tried to do with the model router on GPT-5. So what would happen is a query would come in, and they were doing what I think a lot of us were doing anyway, which was a query was coming in. We were looking at its level of complexity as quickly as we could, and then deciding whether you send it to an expensive model or a cheap model, um, or indeed a specialist model. I mean, if you're doing sentence analysis, you might be better off with a BERT transformer model that you just run on your own AWS than asking one of these big fancy all thinking models to work on. And so what OpenAI tried to do was, or did, I think quite successfully, was establish this routing where you have instant answers and not. The way I do that, by the way, is I just use Perplexity for instant answers, and I keep GPT 5.2 on a sort of thinking level. I think the question that I have is about how sophisticated users will end up getting once they get used to the technology, because we establish a new grammar with any type of technology. You talked about pick please and bourbon, which were the original, bourbon became Instagram. And the way people use Instagram today, forget the fact that there are reels and all these other things. I think reels are the little circular ones, right? It is completely different. They style themselves. There's that Instagram pout that
Mhm.
people put on. There are ways you take photos. There's ways in which you talk about it. When emoji exploded because Apple put the emoji keyboard on the an iPhone back, I think, in 2011, 2012, and people could use emoji within Instagram, and you can see the use rising. So a new grammar emerges whenever we use a technology. And so I think if you took people back to the original Instagram, they would feel a bit bereft because they've lost loads of the things
Yeah.
that they have become dependent on in order to express themselves on that medium. So I'm long and short of it, because I'm not American nor am I an academic, so I actually can't summarize my thoughts as crisply, Jeremy, as you can. So apologies to listeners. But the long and short of it is, won't a new grammar of use emerge with these systems? And won't people, as they get comfortable and confident with them and go up that experience curve, push much, much harder? So I could not go back to GPT-4 now. I could have stayed on GPT-4 for much, much longer, but you've given me the forbidden fruit of Gemini 3, and I don't want to go back now. And I am, as a result, even in areas where I'm not an expert, I'm pushing those machines much, much harder than I ever thought I would. There is a new grammar and new behavior emerging. So I don't know whether you get to a satisficing of these tools. Uh, because you know, maybe you do, and maybe they're like donuts. There's only so many Krispy Kreme donuts you'll eat in one sitting, or maybe they're not like um, maybe they're not like um, donuts. Maybe in fact they are like personal motivation. Maybe they're like, I don't know how to do it yet. Maybe they're like, I haven't yet run my best time. I haven't yet done the most pull-ups I'll ever do in my life. And if that's the case, I can imagine people wanting to have better and better systems.
I think it could be a hardware situation as well. Like we don't yet know that chapter. I was just playing with these G2, glasses where you have a screen, inside the glass that you could read as a teleprompter or give you, ambient information. You can imagine that the next generation of these hardware devices, the wristwatch that's AI powered, or the rings, et cetera, like that may play into the market dynamics as well. In our remaining few minutes, because we're gonna we have to step aside. In a few minutes, I want to do a kind of lightning round of a few things. One of which was I was delighted to learn that you're an audiophile. You're someone who loves listening to music and to high quality kind of gear. I wonder if you would share with me and with us a couple of things that you have enjoyed or that you like on the high end audio. It's not something everybody is familiar with, so maybe it'd be nice to just share a couple of.
Yeah. I made a list, and the list went on and on. I'm looking down at it now. You need to have DACs, which basically take the audio sound. They skip the processor on your phone or in your laptop, and they go through dedicated circuitry to provide a much, much cleaner sound. And each DAC is like it's like a 1930s race car. They sound and deliver differently, and then you need to have different headphones on the other side, which all respond differently to different music and different DACs. But funnily enough, my go-to headphones are I think I've got them here. Uh, my Beats Fit Pros,
Huh.
which are really, really uh, great for above average. Oh, wait a second. I pulled that out, and then the phone connected to it. They're really good for above average listening. But my super high end headphones are a pair of Audezis, which I drive by by a valve amplifier, so not even a
Wow.
transistor, certainly not solid state physics. It has green glowing valves. That is really, really great. Although if you're into like Dutch speed GABA at 180 BPM, somehow a valve amplifier doesn't feel right for it. But if you want to listen to Dire Straits and Sultans of Swing, it's absolutely phenomenal. And the other thing I really love using is a thing called DJ Studio. So I have a set of decks, but I travel a lot, and I obviously can't cart my decks with me. So I will take DJ Studio, which is a digital audio workstation designed purely for making DJ sets. And in that, I'll be on the plane. I will have a DAC with a pair of headphones called Solitaire TNAs, which are quite high end, but they have noise cancelling in them as well. And I will just spend an hour or two on a flight making a new set, and I will be releasing my Christmas set maybe this weekend if I get around to it. Otherwise, just before Christmas.
That's so cool. what are your two or three favorite things to listen to? So you've got all this incredible equipment. What are the things that either on your playlist right now that people might be curious about, or that you are excited to listen to over break?
I'm just discovering music that I can mix. So it really depends where my mood is. So I've just for the Christmas playlist, because it has to be a bit more mainstream. People have to recognize the tracks. It's been things out of the '90s and 2000s. But also I will be listening to ambient digital music, because that's also quite nice. You have very long transitions over it. I mean, I can my Spotify Unwrapped, let's say, was incredibly weird. And in one case, I was in the sort of top 0.1% of one particular artist, because they get about 1,000 listens a month.
Oh,
So yeah,
interesting. Interesting. That's very interesting. Mine
yeah,
is
yeah.
so monodimensional. I'm just a classical music listener. It's just Mahler and Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert and those kind of
Well, they're classics. They don't go out of style. I do also listen to some classics as well. So Goldberg Variations is one of the ones that I will listen to for when I'm doing my headphone testing in a listing room.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Is that because you can just hear more of the fine
Yeah,
variation
yeah.
needed?
So I just have a panel of tracks. So Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits, from the Goldberg Variation, something called Letter by Yoshiwa, who's a Japanese contemporary composer, and then some sort of more dance tracks as well. Just that is the panel that I try to listen to when I pick up a pair of headphones.
Interesting. There are a couple of questions that have come in
Sure.
via the chat. One of them might be too broad for us to answer briefly, but James Webb is just asking about AI's biggest near-term threat isn't Skynet, it's deepfakes, turning truth into a choose-your-own adventure. How do we verify reality when anyone can fake it? I don't know if we can answer that very
Well,
briefly.
I can answer that really brief. I mean, briefly in a sense. So absolutely, there's an issue. But I would say the issue predates deepfakes, and it predates AI. And in fact, it comes from the distribution incentives, first of the algorithms themselves, but then also for journalists. So journalists needing to, and I know none of Jeremy's students would ever do this, but uh, needing to polarize conversation in order to get clicks and views. And this year we've seen some examples of that, where really, really poor quality non-studies from highly reputable universities have been quoted and requoted. And none of the journalists seemingly have chosen to look into the appendixes and the data and the caveats that were made around it, because it allowed them to put a headline figure in a headline.
Yeah.
So let's be realistic actually about the information environment in which have already existed. Deepfakes were meant to change the course of the elections in 2024. They did not. What it does tell us is that there is an incredible need for verification capabilities, and that's an enormous opportunity for any entrepreneur to build those capabilities. And frankly, we all need them. So we have a whole set, or we're in version, I don't know, 9 or 10 of our LLM powered fact checking
Mm,
systems.
mhm.
Like we've learned quite a lot about how to use them to do that, and that is really an opportunity. And the other thing that we've done is we've essentially said to the team that we don't have hallucinations in Exponential View, because everything is owned by a person.
Mhm.
So if you copy and paste something out of an LLM that's got a hallucination in it, that's you saying it. That's not the LLM saying it.
Mhm.
And that's particularly the case if we're going to do this publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. We just created a new set of principles that we're working on at the school, and one of them is essentially what you just said, that you own the material that you use regardless of where it's from. So you could get, problematic material from an AI, certainly with hallucination or just errors. You could also get that from Wikipedia or anywhere else, or from a source you interview who you weren't really thorough about looking
Right.
into. So absolutely, you own the material. I think it's a great principle. I want to get to also some just your phone. Like, what's the stuff that's on your phone? I always find that what we have on our phone, because our phones are often always with us, um, is a reflection of some of what we're interested in or some of what we find useful. So, what are a couple things on your? If you were to show us your home, so you don't
Well,
have
I'd love to do that, but I'm actually looking at my
to.
phone right now. I
But
think the most telling thing about my phone is it's all the travel apps like the BA app and my airport transfer app because I fly so much that literally live on my home screen. And yeah, there is a panel of all the AIs as well. But one of the things I would note is that there is so much cognitive load now in understanding what tool you need to use.
yeah.
So I talked about shortwave for email, which is absolutely brilliant, and the power I have to have an AI look over all my email on my phone is remarkable. But I don't like the interface for reading email, so I
Yeah.
still have the Gmail app up. So I'm flipping now between deciding which email I should use or not use. So I think my phone is all it does is it reflects the fact that I work with knowledge, with information, with ideas, and I travel too much.
You'll
How about
like
you? What's on your phone?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share because I'm actually using the desktop app for the first time
Okay.
for Substack Live, so I can sort of show a little bit of what's there.
Oh, what's that
Um,
goblin thing running?
I don't even know which one that refer. Oh, that's Wake Out. So when I'm standing at this desk all day and I need to move, I turn on Wake Out and it gives me a little like exercise set of moves to do for 30 seconds or a minute. It's kind of like a exercise snack, people
Oh,
call it,
very
right?
good. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
I have Snipped for podcast listening because I
Oh,
can
yeah.
take highlights and I have Reader for saving for later or reading subscriptions that I have or anything I've saved for later. I have the Aura app because I'm an Aura person and I
Hmm.
want to just track metrics, I guess. Substack app to read interesting stuff from you and so many others. Google Photos, Apple Photos, both. Can't seem to pick one. Butterfly app to enter my building. The camera
Oh, I
app.
didn't. Okay,
Yeah, it's
right,
like a digital door, essentially, digital door lock kind of
right.
thing. Task app, Headspace for relaxing
Headspace.
from this crazy world of Manhattan for a few minutes at a time, and for focus music as well. Actually, I find that useful.
Yes. So for that, I use Pizziz. So this is probably the app I have used the most in the last 10 or 15 years. Pzizz.
Huh.
So it generates sleep hypnosis tapes
Hmm.
for the session length that you want, and so I'll use Pizziz for 20 minutes to have a nap on my couch, which I'm pointing at right now, but you
Huh.
can't see. I will use it for if I'm in an Uber to the airport, I'll take 20 minutes and it gets me right in. I'll do the caffeine nap where I take an espresso and then
Oh,
I'll
nice.
start my nap. And then on overnight flights, I will use it as well. And then if I'm when I'm jet lagged at home, that's what will help me get to sleep. So that app runtime is probably getting 10 hours a week on average and has done for a decade. And it was like $50 to buy a lifetime subscription, Pzizz. And yes, it does focus music as well. But I'm surprised you're using that rather than just putting some Mahler on in the background.
The problem for me is if I'm listening to Mahler, I actually am distracted from the work. I can't focus on the work. I'm just focusing on the music, and I'm starting to think about this. There's so many different things going on within that symphonic composition that I cannot sort of just turn it off. I can't use it as background music, basically. Like I can,
Right.
I can,
Interesting.
I can only use it as foreground music, which is, I guess, a pro and con to that. And what about physical hardware? You showed the pen. I have an old school thing as well, which is this sand timer. I like being able to see, I have,
Wow. That is pretty cool.
yeah, I have the tick time too thing, which is, it shows you a visible countdown
Oh, yeah, yeah, I've seen those.
for,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
for staying focused. But I actually like the physicality of this sand timer. Anything else around you
So what
that?
do I have? I have an Ura, but it's charging right now because I forgot to charge it a couple of days ago. I have a Paper Republic leather bound notebook folio,
Hmm,
which you can just slip new inserts in, and you can actually run. I actually run three different notebooks in there,
hmm.
so that you can have one that's just for your jotting of your to do list, and then others are for thinking time. So I use that quite a lot. And
Yeah, I have
the
this
other thing,
remarkable.
it's like that, right? Yeah.
The remarkable the paper tablet, which is
Oh, you've got the paper
my
tablet, yeah.
new
So
new.
I never gelled with writing on devices. I know people can and do, and my kids do, but I never figured it out. Another hardware things that I use are well, I mean, to be honest, when I travel, it's my headphones, it's my my pen and my notebook and a lacrosse ball,
Mm.
which gyms weirdly never have, but are really useful for.
Is that like a squeezy, like a little
No, like a really hard
squeeze ball? Oh, a hard.
lacrosse. No, no, hard lacrosse balls to put into your pressure points, like your tops of your glutes and your
Oh,
hip
right.
flexors, because you want to do that facial massage, especially once you've been on on your second 10-hour flight in 5 days.
That's
Yeah,
that's a new one for me. That's interesting. I use these little squishies just to like get my, hands moving sometimes, but that sounds much more actually healthy what you're
it's much more painful. Yeah, I can tell you that much. Yeah.
anything else physically around you that's
I'm casting an eye around, and it is it's funny. It's my notebook, it's my pen. More than anything else, my Oura ring, of course, but I actually almost think of that as a digital um piece. And yeah, no, I mean, I think that is the limit. That is the limit of it, even as I travel. And in fact, part of the issue is that with the travel, I don't really want to be uh cracking out a load of different things.
yeah.
So I did briefly have a pair of smart sleep goggles, but
All
I
right.
find the Pizziz app, PZIZZ or PZIZZ, if you're American, is probably more effective actually than any smart goggles I've tried.
That's cool. One other thing I'll show, I have this color cube. I don't know how
Mm,
well it comes across on the
that's
screen.
amazing.
It's called a CMY cube. I think the company's from
I'm
Australia.
getting one of those.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
CMY Cube.
Beautiful device. I mean, it's not a device. It's a beautiful little glass. And what's amazing is it's actually like depending on where you look at it and what type of light you look at it through, you get different views. And I find it's just like a nice thing for like taking a deep breath in 30 seconds, just looking at it. I came across it at the fancy, not the fancy food show, the toy show. There are all these shows in New York at the Javits Center, and you discover the most interesting innovations in different fields.
Are you a bit stressed, Jeremy? Can I
Okay,
just check? Are you a bit
yeah,
stressed because you've talked to me about your squeeze ball? You've talked to me about headspace for meditating. You've
wake
talked
up
to
for
me about
exercise.
your CMY cube to chill you out. I don't want to go all, shrink
Yeah,
on you, but there's a little hint of
very interesting.
intensity there.
Oh, you know what I think it is? I think it's my way of counterbalancing the craziness of Times Square. So I work in one of the craziest set of, of space in New York City and maybe in the United States. And so it's loud, it's busy, it's chaotic, it's crazy. And I'm coming here every day, and to kind of block out all of that external stuff plus the craziness of the news ecosystem and the moment we're in, I feel like these
Mm.
little things are like my momentary ways of just returning my focus to the smaller things that I'm doing, rather than the major
Wow.
things that are exploding around me. Um,
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Times Square is probably one of the most chaotic places on this beautiful planet.
yeah. Well, I want to let you get back to your work. You do so many different things and you do them so well. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I want to give you a chance to share any kind of like lingering thoughts or something, a loose end that we didn't touch upon. I also want you to just have a chance to remind people of where they can find
Mm.
your stuff, the Exponential View, obviously on Substack. You have your show on Bloomberg. You have so many
Mm.
different things. Where can people find
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think the best thing to find me is Exponential View. Putting it into Bing or Google, and you'll find me from there. And I think the real the takeaway here is that these technologies, these AI technologies, are real, and they're really real, and they're really doing things. There's lots of criticisms of them, but no one who's criticized them has come up with anything better. And just like in the history of any technology, the Wright brothers used a propeller plane. We don't use propeller engines today. Of course, there's going to be evolution, and I just really encourage people to spend that time to practice, to build your capacities. I think one surprising thing I noticed, and this is a sort of a rough measure, but I would think that 70 to 80% of my workflows today, the things that I do, are different to how I did them 3 months ago.
Mm,
And so that sense of, it's not even constant reinvention. It's just as if, imagine you're going to the gym and you start doing chin ups with with a rubber band to help you, and then you start to do pull-ups, but you also use the rubber band. Then eventually you take that band away, and then you start to go to muscle ups, and then you go to weighted muscle ups. You constantly get progress. It's progressive overload, and that's how you build your capacity. And in a way, when we're working with these tools, the same sort of thing is going to happen. The things that I hunt and pecked with ChatGPT 2 years ago, it would be an absurdity to do today. Then the question is, how much time can you actually spend with it? How important it is for us? It's the core of our business. For you, it's pretty close to the core of your business. But I do think that it's just that's a way to approach it. I mean, that is ultimately the way to approach it, is to build your capacity for this tool use, to understand it, to understand the issues from your own experience, rather than have it filtered by layers and layers that sit in between.
Yeah, I totally would second that. The idea that kind of we need to encounter it ourselves. Ethan Mollick in his book Co-Intelligence and elsewhere has talked about the need to actually spend 10 hours, right, really wrestling with a particular kind of technology, in this case, large language models and AI assistants, to start to really get even a beginning of a picture. And I think for a lot of us, we need to continue because the tools keep changing, right? There's a new ChatGPT visual model, right, out this week. Like every week, virtually, there's something new that we can experiment with. And I think we need to do that firsthand kind of
Mm.
encountering of this rather than secondhand kind of speculating from a distance. And I admire that about you. You're continually kind of experimenting and using these tools in different ways and reinventing the workflow, which we can all do. We can all learn from that. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope we get a chance to talk again in 2026 and see where this is all at. And maybe even in New York City again when you're next here. It's been a pleasure
I would
learning
love
from
to do
you.
that. We've been Spartans because it's just got to 300 viewers,
Oh wow.
which
Okay.
feels like a good moment to say goodbye. Thank you so
Great.
much, Jeremy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much. And you can visit us on Wonder Tools and on Exponential View. And thanks everyone for joining and sharing the time with us. Appreciate it.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.